Welcome back to the Mayorverse, everybody. Mayor Reynolds, aka Midnight Mayor here. We have our first significant DEADROP news update of 2025. Midnight Society's creative director, Quinn Delhoyo, just held something like an AMA, a roundtable with variants, for about 2 hours, gave us a roadmap for the next 3 months, an update on what the studio is going to be working on directly and what they're going to be doing to communicate with us. Stuff about early access, we're going to go over it all. It was a 2-hour call, but I'm going to summarize everything for you. There's a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. So one of the first things that Quinn shared on the call was this roadmap. This is for January, February, and March of DEADROP's development. It's very detail-oriented. Quinn opened the call by stating that he really feels that the studio didn't really do a good job during 2024 of communicating with the community, and they want to change that. And they're going to do that in a couple different ways right off the bat. Quinn is going to hold these calls every 2 weeks to show off some new stuff that they're working on to variants and Discord and so on and so forth. So basically every 2 weeks, we're going to be interacting with, listening to the creative director of the studio, which is great. And then every 3 months or so, they're going to release one of these new roadmaps. This is essentially the roadmap for Q1 of 2025, January, February, and March, and what Midnight Society is working on and plans to have complete within that quarter. So as you can see here, and we're going to dive into some of this stuff because he elaborated on some of this. Atrium District Art Complete. This is the map that we were playing in the recent Founders tests. They want to have the art completed on that map within the next, obviously, well, at this point, January's almost over, so about 2 more months. Slums District, Small Design Complete. This was a blockout map, a prototype of a map that we played in a previous Founders test. Claw Adrenaline feature complete. That is the feature where as you do more stuff when you're playing as a claw, you get a little bit more pumped or juiced, you can run faster, so on and so forth. They want to complete their tutorial or onboarding experience for new players. That's really important in any game these days, that when you first play the game, you understand how to play it, you have fun playing those initial hour or so, you learn the game, you enjoy it. They want to have that complete in the next few months here. Cleaner and enforcement behavior updates. This is the PvE element of the game. We're going to talk more about that. Rat guilds, additional progression features like rat, skill, career, etc. Performance updates and map objectives. And then I'm going to detail these for you guys as Quinn did during the call, give you his thoughts and some of my own along the way. So right off the bat, I want to talk about early access. This was a big topic on everybody's minds, of course. We're expecting the 2025 year to be the year of DEADROP early access. Here's what was discussed during the call. Quinn did not give a date. However, he said they're working towards that date very aggressively. The plan is still to launch on PC and console at the same time, that early access period. However, he was very candid during the call. He didn't want to overpromise anything. And he said, currently the game runs on console. They've been saying that, but the console versions are slightly behind. So they're going to have to ramp up those efforts if they're going to make that goal. However, that is the goal. And then in addition to that, talking about early access, they're currently having discussions about whether early access will be just that free-to-play launch for everybody, as the intention of the game to be free-to-play, or will the early access version have an upfront price? Path of Exile 2, for example, recently launched their early access and charged $20.99. Very different game, obviously ARPG, but a lot of games do early access periods that are paid and then move into free-to-play launch. Midnight Society is currently having those discussions right now, and we're going to talk about some of the contents of the early access throughout this video as Quinn detailed, but I just thought that was good information to call out. There's pros and cons, obviously, towards both free-to-play early access periods and paid, as early access is still, for most developers, Path of Exile is a very feature complete, polished game to be in early access. But other games early access, for example, the Forever Winter, which I covered on this channel, was a very rough experience, right? So there's really different audiences that you target depending on whether you are charging or going free to play. Obviously, you will have more players if you go free to play. There's pros and cons of both. Midnight Society is debating that right now, but that's kind of the core TDLR of the early access. This one's super short and to the point. The question was asked about when the next actual playtest is. There isn't one currently scheduled. That doesn't mean that there isn't going to be one. However, the team is highly focused on the actual development to get that early access version of the game ready and released. And Quinn talked a lot about, what did he call it? Is the juice worth the squeeze kinds of things, where when they do those test sessions or release a build to the public, there's pros and cons to that, right? Because the team has to kind of stop what they're doing and developing the things that they're working on and focus on that next test build that they're pushing out to everybody or whatever. So right now there's nothing scheduled. Doesn't mean there isn't going to be one, but as of now, there's nothing scheduled. So something that I want to talk about in this video right away is maps, right? Maps are very near and dear to my heart as a gamer. I think like whenever I play like a battle royale game, you know, new guns are cool, new heroes or characters and Apex or whatever, that's cool. But maps make the biggest difference to me and excite me the most. So this was an interesting discussion. On the roadmap, we have Atrium District Art Complete. Again, this is the map that they're furthest along, and this used to be Proving Ground 2 from the very first time we played it in Snapshot 6, I believe, in 2023. We've now played a pretty close to finished version of that map in the Founders Test, but they still got 2 more months to go as they complete the art, polish it up, so on and so forth. Then they've got next up on the map thing, a Slums District Small Design Complete. You know, that Quinn could probably talk about that all day, but one of the things he talked about, which is cool, was he plans to like bring something to these calls, hopefully each time, to show us what they're working on, show us, you know, a new weapon design or a new map, something that they're working on. He wants to show everybody a little something. During this video, I'm going to show you guys that they posted some new weapon renders, which are pretty cool, which he brought to this call. So I will share those throughout the video and show you guys. But I wanted to talk about something, and I'm glad that this got brought up on the call, and that is cold storage, formerly, you know, Sector 3, which was the map that was designed from, what was it, Snapshot 2? We got the earliest version of that map, and it's near and dear to a lot of our hearts because that was the first map that we really played somewhat close to. It wasn't Blockout, I forget which stage they called it at the time, but that was when the game kind of had that big period where tons of players came in, kind of our first real look at some form of art and style in the world. And I love that map, and I know many others do too. Those wide open spaces for snipers, the verticality, the sector shutdown mechanic, the super lift, all those things, right? And it got brought up. You know, they've talked a lot about Atrium, formerly Proving Ground 2. We've tested some other Blockout maps, you know, Proving Ground 3, Slums, Atrium, all those things. We got those old concept arts. What's going on with cold storage? You know, how many maps is the early access going to launch with? And they said they're currently having those discussions. It sounds like Atrium is 100% definitely going to be there at launch and is the furthest along art-wise, feature-wise, all of that. They're currently working on other stuff, you know, regarding the map, such as map objectives, which is going to be, you know, reasons to move around the map, different, go about the map a different way in addition to the sector shutdown mechanic. You know, you got to get a key card and then go to the other side of the map to open this door. Different things like that make the game more replayable and change, you know, every raid that you go on. But what's going on with Sector 3 cold storage? And Quinn made a face during this discussion because this is a very real discussion and unfortunately a kind of painful one. So it seems the reality is that cold storage, because of the way it was developed through this iterative snapshot process, wasn't really built the right way. And this kind of reminds me of the discussion that 1047 Games had with Splitgate and why they had to, when they got funding, had to go back and just start fresh with Splitgate 2 because they built the core of their game on like a shaky foundation, so to speak. That map basically needs to be totally rebuilt from the ground up. Or they would need to totally outsource it for somebody else, another developer, contractors, to art it and finish it because of the way it was built for snapshot release. And this is one of those things where, you know, game development is hard and open development makes it even harder, right? Because now we've all played that map, we love it, and it appears to be somewhat held together from a technical perspective, probably with you know, duct tape and whiteout and glue, it seems. So hopefully we'll see it return in the future, but you know, in Quinn's words, he doesn't expect to see it released anytime soon. It seems like the notion of cold storage Sector 3 releasing with early access, and I know they've changed sectors and districts and all that stuff, but cold storage as we know it, and a lot of us love it, doesn't seem like it will be part of DEADROP's early access which, to be honest, it is quite painful and kind of sucks, because I know for me personally, Atrium's cool and all, especially now that it's arted. It's got a really cool look. I like cold storage, the design of it, a lot more personally. But anyway, cold storage is not in DeadDrop's 2025 plans. It seems not 100%, confirmed, but just sounds that way. There were lots of questions about monetization and Web 2 and Web 3 elements, and this is what it all boils down to. There's a lot to be determined, but there's a few things that we can count on, and Quinn elaborated on some of this stuff, which hasn't changed so much from the past, really. Of course, there's probably going to be a battle pass. They're working on cosmetics, some of which were in the founders test that we could get a look at. But Quinn did say there will definitely be a marketplace akin to Counter-Strike, where players will be able to trade and purchase cosmetics with each other as a community. There's no real elaboration on, how Web3 that may or may not be. But it did seem, based on this call, that there certainly is a lot of interest from the Web3 space, still in the investor space as well, which is good. More on that later. So I personally, they didn't talk about how deep they are going into Web3 too much. A lot of those things, again, are going to be determined and be very detail-oriented. But they're not going so far in, and Quinn's mentioned this. Everybody in the studio has mentioned this repeatedly. There's not going to be any pay-to-win, no coins or NFTs that have any effect on gameplay. Everything will be strictly cosmetic, and that will be basically a in-game marketplace. They did not say, we should have asked this during the call, maybe we can ask again in 2 weeks, since Quinn is going to be holding one of these Q&As in Discord every 2 weeks. Will that marketplace be there in the game on day one of early access? That'd be a great question to ask. But he also went on, and again, I think this is the perfect stance. The game will not force any type of Web3 on anybody. They don't want people to have to create a wallet to play the game. If you want to play it just like any traditional game without any involvement in any marketplace, Web3, anything, you're going to be able to do that. There's nothing. But they want to make the onboarding onto the stuff like the marketplace pretty easy. And I also love that Quinn said he wants the cosmetics to fit in universe and always be consistent. He doesn't want to see players running around with cat ears or pumpkin heads during Halloween or a Santa hat. He wants stuff to feel like the real world or the world of DeadDrop, which is really cool and interesting and fits their particular, cyberpunk inspired style. I love that. There was a comment about like the Halo Infinite cat ears. I'm all for cool, inspired, even somewhat over-the-top cosmetics, but I agree. Let's stay away from the stupid stuff. The world's #1 Fire Penguin asked the question about anti-cheat plans. Quinn didn't want to detail this too much, and I kind of agree with this. You don't want people delving into specifics about the anti-cheat to get ready to basically cheat in the game, knowing what the exact anti-cheat plans are. But he confirmed that Midnight Society is still engaged with and plans to use Easy Anti-Cheat, but they're also engaged with another company to help with anti-cheat, and he didn't detail that. I'm sure we'll find out what it is down the road, but it is good. And he said, because they're doing stuff like a marketplace and cosmetics that you can, take in with you and potentially leave behind, so to speak, and we've got into that a million times, anti-cheat is absolutely super important and a huge priority. There was a question about DeadDrop feeling more arcade-like or more grounded and hardcore like Tarkov, and this is a great question. I've talked a lot about this, and the game definitely did shift a lot when you look at the old Snapshot 5 through 7 gameplay and speed and feel versus the recent Founders tests. And Quinn gave a really good answer for this. They don't want to move so far towards the grounded Tarkov approach. I think the universe doesn't really even fit that well, in my opinion. But Quinn talked about how the middle ground for this is actually in that kind of that rat versus claw gameplay. And while the goal isn't to have claws feel so slow and cumbersome and tank-like as something like Tarkov, they definitely want it to feel more athletic, if we can say it that. But the rats really should feel more mobile, and they want to get it to they want to get it to a balanced place where the rats do kind of feel like that very fast, fun, arcadey gameplay, whereas claws obviously feel more higher risk, slower, more deliberate, and sweaty, if we could say that. You should be sweating during your experience. There was stuff about how can they balance, respawns or the lack thereof with rats versus claws. So good stuff here, and I do like that. I do like that concept, because I know there's a lot of us that certainly feel like we don't want the game to slow down too much, because what drew us towards the game initially was that DeadDrop was gonna be faster paced and more high risk gameplay wise, not just from you can take your loot in and cosmetics and lose it, but faster paced, higher risk, high mobility, high reward gameplay. And I don't want to lose that, and I really hope that we can tune the game to really capture that feeling and vibe, so it does stand out versus the other I almost said Tarkov shooters, extraction shooters on the market, which all keep going for that slow, deliberate, painful gameplay. And speaking of rats, there was discussion about different rat guilds and guild chips. So if you remember, if you played the Founders Test, you could earn points to upgrade your rat chip to unlock different abilities or stats, so to speak. And there's actually going to be multiple rat guild chips, which is really cool. The first one you get has a very high tax rate, a dust tax rate, if you recall. There's going to be other unlockable guild chips with different tax rates, different abilities tied to them. But he also mentioned that rats that are using the same guild chip will be able to natively, if they choose, I don't know how it's going to be implemented, but it's a cool idea, to team up in the game if you run into another rat that's in the same guild as you. Maybe the friendly fire gets turned off and you can kind of team up if you run into them in the game. We'll see how that works, but it's a cool idea. Lore came up several times, something that's also very near and dear to my heart. Midnight 2 Born Ruthless, our latest live-action DeadDrop short film, inspired by the DeadDrop universe, just came out. It's on the channel. Go watch it. It's 28 minutes of stylish action, if I do say so myself. I'd really appreciate it if you guys watch it. That's a story that we came up with originally as a group, myself and some of my friends, basically, one of which who is also a variant. Anyway, go check it out. I think it's a great example of what you could do with seasonal storylines in DeadDrop. But Quinn actually mentioned that they've actually have expanded the DeadDrop lore kind of in the background quite a bit before the downscaling of the team and everybody's focus had to shift. He said he may actually show some of this in the future. He's got I thought of like a detective room, with all these like threads going to each other and how everything is connected. He may show this in the future. In the Founders Test, there was like lore discovery stuff, which is really cool. I know I'm super into lore. I do hope that they continue to expand this. I know they can't pay somebody full-time to work on just writing in lore right now, but I think the universe is incredible. It has incredible potential for this, so I'm glad it's still in the picture. There's also a question about PvE in general, and right now they're focusing a lot on making the cleaners and enforcers, which is the term for the white, like armor-clad looking enemies that we saw in the Founders Test. They're really focusing on tuning the AI for those enemies, so to speak, right now, and making them engaging, unpredictable, and fun to fight. Quinn also mentioned that they have ideas for other enemies in the future of DeadDrop on paper, but that they're not a focus right now because the team is very small. Right now he said they're working with a little over 20 developers. He talked about some of this stuff, like there's only 2 environmental artists on the whole team right now, which makes sense. If you only have 20 people, right, you've got 1 or 2 of virtually everything. There's, like he said, on Call of Duty, there's probably 300 environmental artists. So when they're talking about who's working on arting a map, right now it's literally 2 people. That's it. So this has been a very laborious process, unfortunately, because of the downscaling in the dev team that happened during 2024. But they really have to be careful right now and choose what's important and what to focus on for early access, what's going to feel the best, have the best impact on players' experiences. And then once they get that version of the game out the door and it feels good and people are playing it, they can elaborate on a lot of these things and expand over time, hopefully staffing up due to the hopeful success of the game and giving the team more resources to expand these things. So the ideas for other PvE enemies certainly exist, but right now they're focused on cleaners and enforcers. And speaking of priorities, a question about UGC, user-generated content, through Lua scripting and all those other things that was initially part of the vision for DEADROP. You know, Quinn talks about how important he believes it is to the future of DEADROP. You know, a lot of us made modes with Lua scripting in Snapshot 7.5. He said he's still very bullish on it, and he believes it's an extremely important force multiplier for the game, and it's still part of the plan. But again, with the size of the team right now, where they are in development, it's not currently a priority. They're putting all of the focus into the extraction shooter mode, the core of the game. Makes a lot of sense. This was also very, very, very important. I probably should have mentioned this earlier in the video, but for those of you who've been following Midnight Society a long time, which is definitely all the variants and many others, you know, the studio did downscale during 2024 due to unforeseen circumstances with Dr. Disrespect, Guy Beam, obviously departing from the studio. Not going to get into that here. Everybody knows at this point. But he mentioned that investor discussions are ongoing and that they're doing play tests basically on a weekly basis with investors, which is, or potential investors, which is really good news. There was a question about, you know, when will they be able to hire more staff? When will they have more resources to do so? How secure are the current staff? How much funding do they have for, you know, how long? And obviously there's a lot of unknowns, and, you know, until something is signed, you can't say a deal. But he said he does feel very good about where things are going with investors in general. He's very optimistic about it. You know, you don't know how it's going to go until it's done. But he said he is feeling very optimistic about the future of their funding. And, you know, based on, he didn't say this is my interpretation, so, you know, don't quote me. It does sound like a lot of the investment attention in this game right now is coming from the Web3 space. Again, my personal speculation. And, you know, the Web3 space has been going crazy over the last month or two. So, just interesting. We'll see what happens there. I certainly hope to have good news for Midnight Society on the investment and funding space in the near future, hopefully during 2025, right? The early access launch really hopefully could generate even more interest and hype, so that would be great. And last but not least, again, Quinn mentioned how important he thinks live events are for the community, for the team to be energized. Just, you know, everybody who's attended one of these events knows that they're awesome. They feel great. He hopes that they return. No plans right now, but again, with more investment, once they get the early access out the door, maybe we'll see something. I still think it'd be great to have them appear at some type of expo, like PAX in the future. They don't need to go full-fledged, you know, hold their own event thing. But you never know. I know those events are also dying, so we'll see. But Quinn certainly hopes that they come back. I don't know where this is going to end up in the video, because I just said the last thing was last but not least, but in editing it might change. Anyway, a question was asked about the rating of DEADROP, and he said, again, not done. ESRB will need to rate the game officially, but he is pushing for a teen rating, and he said he wants it to be the hardest teen rating. And really the idea here is to not limit the game's appeal with a mature rating. And he said that basically all the stats and data, you know, really show in the gaming industry, if you want to attract the most players, you want to have a teen rating, because if you're going to be mature, you are going to limit your player base due to, you know, different retail things and parents and just decision making, so on and so forth. So he wants it to be teen, which I think is also Halo's current rating right now in the gaming space. And, you know, Halo does some pretty mature things, if we're being honest, especially story wise. Like, I remember, was it Halo 5 where people were like getting vaporized and turned into skeletons in space? Anyway, Quinn wants DEADROP to be teen. We'll see where it goes. We'll see where it lands. But that's out there. All right, guys, that's everything. Hopefully I summed it all up quick enough for you. Again, Quinn plans to hold these Q&As every 2 weeks going forward. I think that's good. I think the communication with the community is a positive overall. Showing us a little something here and there will keep people engaged and excited, even if it's just, you know, the variants who have been with the game since day one, to hopefully generate that positivity to amplify the game when early access comes out. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Obviously, hopefully that means we're going to have a lot more videos, more frequent videos on the channel, more to talk about. So if you want more DEADROP and Midnight Society coverage, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if I have one request, if you made it this far in the video, go watch Midnight 2. It's on the channel. It's our 28-minute short film inspired by the Dead Drop universe. Story of my variant. We got plans for Midnight 3 if we can fund it. Talking about Midnight Society funding. Short films and films are certainly tough to fund as well. So anyway, go check it out. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you're all excited for more Dead Drop news. And we'll see you in the next video. Mayor Reynolds.